Amnesty International is calling for justice for two women who were killed and dumped by the roadside 6 years ago. Popi, Qwabe and Bongeka, Phungula were killed in Soweto over 6 years ago during a night out. Police have been accused of mishandling the case, resulting in it being thrown out of court for lack of evidence. Let's speak now to Sibusiso Khasa from Amnesty International. Mr. Khasa, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Can you firstly provide an overview of the case of Popi, Qwabe as well as Bongeka, Phungula, including the circumstances surrounding their murders and the current status of the investigation?
Okay, good afternoon, Kanta, and good afternoon to the viewers, and thank you for having Amnesty International. And so, just to perhaps remind the public as to what happened. So, on the 12th of May 2017, Popi and Bongeka were on a night out, and they were last seen catching a taxi to Maponya Mall. And since then, the families discovered that they were killed and dumped at different locations in the roadsides. And so after that, two taxi drivers were arrested. Those taxi drivers were found in possession of some of their items, and they were arrested. But according to the NPA, the information that we've received now is that those taxi drivers were cleared. Even then, before we campaigned on the case, what happened is that there wasn't sufficient evidence, and then the case was struck off the roll. So in 2020, Amnesty International decided to take the case through our Rights for Rights campaign, which is a global campaign, one of the biggest human rights campaigns in the world. So, and about over 300,000 rather people took action calling for the case to be reopened, and the police did reopen the case. And after they reopened the case and reinvestigated, they handed it over to the NPA in 2021. And since then, we have been following up with the NPA office here in Gauteng. But after we sort of hit a snag in the sense that we're not getting an update, we decided to, on the 9th of June, we decided to go to protest outside the headquarters, the NPA headquarters in Pretoria.
Now, you've already started telling us about Amnesty International South Africa becoming involved in advocating for justice in this particular case. Could you tell us a bit more about this picket which was held outside the NPA offices and really its impact on the response from the authorities?
So what happened is that on the 12th of May, which was the anniversary of the 6th anniversary of their killing, we wrote to the director of national prosecution, Shamila Batoy, and what happened is that while we were waiting for her response, days passed, we couldn't get a response from her office, but then we decided that on the 9th we're going to go outside and protest outside there. And they received the same letter that we had shared with them. Now it was a physical copy with the same demands that we wanted, and also in terms of giving them also the list of names of people who had taken action calling for justice for Popi and Bongeka. And then just yesterday, in fact, they responded to us indicating that unfortunately they are not going to be able to prosecute in this particular matter because of insufficient evidence. Because what they are citing in that particular response is that also the DNA report that they received last year in March, it came out clearing the suspects in this particular matter, and also even the cell phone records that have been received. They also received those cell phone records last year in March. They also didn't link the suspects to the scenes of the crime.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sibusiso, but the NPA's decision to refer the case to a magistrate for an inquest, is this indeed true? And if it is, what is the significance of this move?
Okay, at this stage, I guess it's just to try and keep the hope alive, although because we are in touch with the families, although some family members they've completely lost hope, to be honest with you, in terms of getting justice in this particular matter, because as you correctly pointed out, it has been referred to the Pretoria magistrate to look at the case and decide if there is maybe at prima facie to see as to whether any person is responsible, any person who is found to be perhaps responsible, refer the matter back to the NPA to see whether they can reopen, they can sort of re-evaluate and maybe decide to prosecute again.
Now, in light of the NPA statement, there is insufficient evidence to indeed proceed with the prosecution, as you've rightfully pointed out. What are the potential outcomes and the implications of this inquest? And what are the factors, or what other factors will the magistrate consider in indeed determining whether someone is prima facie responsible for these women's deaths?
So it does. So in terms of the outcomes would be the fact that should it happen that they find that someone is prima facie responsible for this matter, then the NPA will have to decide as to whether, if from those particular findings, whether it continues with in the direction of prosecuting. But then it all depends on what we will hear from. It will all depend on what we will hear from the magistrate in terms of this. But I think what this case really points to is the fact that at the entry point, which is the South African Police Service, that's where we have most of these particular problems, because the investigations are carried out by the police, and if it's not thorough investigations, therefore the NPA cannot prosecute and get a conviction.
Let's expand on that last point. I mean, how does this case shed light on the broader issues of gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa? And what are some of the challenges faced by victims and their families in indeed seeking justice for GBVF crimes?
You would recall that if you look at the previous police stats, when it comes to the killing of women, there was an increase of 7.9% when you compare to the previous period in terms of the killings of women. And now what this shows you is the fact that if women continue to be killed in this particular manner, and there's no sufficient evidence, or sometimes people are not even arrested in these particular cases, and obviously police sometimes they don't even carry out thorough investigations. What it does is that the justice system fails to deter as in perpetrators and would-be perpetrators of gender-based violence. So people who are most likely to continue doing what they are doing, because the justice system continues to fail the families and victims of these particular crimes.
Now, according to Amnesty International South Africa, the investigation of GBVF cases needs to be strengthened as well. What specific improvements are necessary to indeed ensure thorough investigations, these effective prosecutions, and also accountability for perpetrators?
The key thing is the fact that the police themselves need to be held accountable, because first of all, they need to, when it comes to investigations, they need to do them timely, and when they get to those particular scenes, they need to make sure that they collect relevant and important evidence that would lead to prosecution. Because if they just go there and then sort of make mistakes that are not supposed to be made, because if you look at this particular case that we're talking about, the families were complaining about the fact that the first part of it, the police, when they investigated, they didn't even look at the cell phone records, and also they didn't even the DNA, as in the forensic report, was not fully released, and also in terms of the collection of DNA, it was a problem.
Now, how can the justice system then act as a deterrent to GBVF crimes and also ensure that perpetrators are charged in accordance with the South African law? Are there any systematic changes or reforms that need to be implemented to indeed achieve this goal?
I guess the main key thing is more about on the implementation part. Hence, I've been pointing out to the things that I've just mentioned in terms of the police doing their job at the investigation level, that making sure that they do things according to the book, what they are supposed to do in terms of collecting evidence, and making sure that they collect the evidence that will lead to prosecutions in court.
And what role does public pressure and indeed advocacy, such as Amnesty International's campaign, play in also bringing attention to cases like Popi and Bongeka's, and also pushing for justice as well?
I guess what's key is the support that organizations like Amnesty International South Africa provides to some of the families, and also in terms of trying to change, to make sure that authorities are held accountable. Because the issue is that now, if you look at this particular case, the families were not even getting any information on these particular cases as to what has been happening with this particular case. So that's why even I recall when we were on the ground on the 9th of June when we were protesting, one of the journalists that were there did ask the NPA as to why does it have to take an organization like Amnesty International for you guys to do your job, to provide to sort of provide an update to the families, because you have a responsibility to do so.
And how will Amnesty International South Africa indeed continue to even monitor this case and engage with relevant authorities regarding the inquest? And what are the expectations from the families of Popi and Bongeka in terms of receiving updates and finding closure here?
Okay, so we have received an apology from the NPA that the NPA did explain that it was more of an oversight issue in terms of the local division here in Gauteng. That's why there hasn't been any particular updates. So basically what we will continue doing is to continue engaging with them, and also in terms of, since we know that now the case is it's going to be referred for an inquest at the Pro Chair Magistrate. That means we'll have to also engage obviously with the Department of Justice in terms of finding out as to what's going on. We'll keep on following up through advocacy means or channels.
And lastly, looking ahead, what steps can be taken to indeed prevent similar cases of GBVF and also ensure that the rights of women and girls are protected in South Africa? How can society work collectively to indeed create a safer environment and eradicate gender-based violence?
Okay, one, it starts with attitudes, because if you are involved in society, also it's a matter of obviously the GBV issue is a multifaceted problem, so it does involve society indeed. So it also depends on the attitude that we as men and other people do have when it comes to our way of thinking and behavior towards women. That's one of the key areas. And also in terms of the police, the justice system in particular, the reason why I keep on going back to the police is because in most cases they are the ones who sort of fail to collect the right evidence, which then ends up leading to these cases not really getting people not getting convicted and no sentencing happening because of these particular issues. And this doesn't reflect well, because people are most likely to do the same things because they know that basically what this does is it creates a culture of impunity.
Yeah. And
if a culture of impunity exists within society, therefore anyone can just do whatever they want to do because they know nothing is going to happen to them.
So let me thank you for your time. That was Sibusiso Khasa from Amnesty International South Africa, of course, giving us an update on the murder of those two women in Soweto, of course, referring to Popi Qwabe and Bongeka Phungula.